So, first and foremost, when did you deploy and where did you deploy?
My first deployment was Iraq, 2006 to 2007. That turned out to be a 15-month deployment. And then we redeployed back to Fort Bragg for just about 12 months and then turned right back around to go to Iraq again for another year. So 2009 to 2010, and then came back and I got out shortly after that.
Okay. And how old were you at that time?
I joined at 22 in 2003, so I spent the majority of my mid to late 20s in the Army.
Okay. And was there a reason why you wanted to join?
Yeah, actually, it's pretty crazy because I had a daughter that had ailment issues, and she was sick a lot. And so in my early 20s, it was really difficult for me to find a job that would have good insurance to support my family. And I started thinking about it. They had this thing going on with the war and stuff like that. So I was like, hey man, I'll just throw myself into it so that I can provide for my kid. So it's kind of like one of those strange necessities. So that's how.
Gotcha. So when you were over there in Iraq, what was your job?
I was an infantryman.
Okay. And what does that mean?
So an infantryman is like a frontline fighter, a individual that was trained to be able to actually endure combat and push through objectives, meet the enemy, and then fight. Like just a paid fighter, gunfighter. You know, it's pretty bananas.
Mm-hmm. So when you signed up, did the experience become what you expected or not at all?
Yes and no. So I mean, I was abreast of the news, you know, at the time. I knew what was happening in these regions, and I knew how contested some of these places were. I willingly chose to be an infantryman, and I willingly chose to become a paratrooper and go to the 82nd. Like, the training was super intense, and everybody that had already been deployed was super adamant about how important all this stuff was. And the culture in the infantry is you're not anything if you don't deploy, if you don't go fight. Like, you have to. You feel it in your core. So when you get there, you've already trained for it, but training and doing practical application of violence is completely different. I grew up in a violent household, but like the scale of violence that was there was a little bit mind-blowing. You compartmentalize it, so it wasn't as intense until after I got out of the Army and had time to decompartmentalize and decompress some things and just realize how absolutely absurd the entirety of it was.
Yeah, and so I understand why you chose to join the military in the first place, but why did you choose to be an infantryman?
Because fuck it. Like, go big. Like, I just thought that out of all the jobs, that would be the one that I fit with my personality type. I'm athletic, you know, and stuff like that. Like, it became like a personal test I just wanted to be a part of it. It's really hard to like describe why, because there wasn't another option, like, not to me. Whenever I first went into the recruiter, I went in there and I was like, yo, I want to be an infantryman. And the recruiter was an old Ranger dude that was like, hell yeah, let's go. And so nobody even tried to like dissuade me. I had good ASVAB scores and a high GT score, and nobody was like, hey, you know, you could possibly do something else. It was just like, oh man, let's go. So everybody it's part of it too, is like, and I didn't know it until I was in it, but like, the infantry is the infantry. It's literally what the Army was designed to do. Everything else is an admin job that was designed to facilitate the Army the infantry doing its job. So it kind of like being in the backbone of the Army, being like the job that the Army was designed to do, fight, was like oddly compelling to a 22-year-old kid that was in Texas at the time watching this. It was just like, hey man, that's what I want to do. Pretty weird, pretty weird.
I get it. You certainly weren't alone.
No, I mean, it was like, it was crazy because all the basic trainings were filled up. Like it was actually like basically on back order. Like everything was all delayed entry for a long time because it was like the infantry was just getting filled up.
So yeah, the infantry was getting filled up. Did you know anyone that had political motivations for joining, or maybe not political motivations, but like 9/11 kind of?
Oh yeah,
motivations?
There were a lot of people that was the key reason was like 9/11. There was a lot of guys that were just, they saw it, and like kids have coined the FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. I think that happened too. And on top of it, like, I'm 43. I was born in 1981. So this was like tailor-made for kids from my generation because we grew up on a healthy diet of Arnold Schwarzenegger and G.I. Joe, Ninja Turtles. Like everything was like highly propagandized to be pro-American and like stand up and fight. And so when this came knocking on our door, it was such a big deal. Like 9/11 was just a huge deal. Like it messed everybody up. Watching it, I watched it live. So it ate me up, but not to the point where I thought it was like something that I needed to do. But there was a lot of kids that it was like, I need to do it. There was a lot of kids that like their dads or uncles had served in Vietnam, their grandpas were in World War II and stuff like that. And so there was a lot of lineage kids. I was in basic training and served with guys that their dads were like colonels and generals. So again, lineage stuff, like there was a lot of kids that just felt like they had to do it.
Yeah. So you said there was a lot of just absurd violence. Can you share some of those stories if you're comfortable?
Yeah, man, like the thing is like there would be days that you could feel it, like, man, this feels like something's gonna go wrong. And then there would be days that like it just felt like a normal day, and then it would just pop off. So there were just like, I know a guy that was standing on the roof of the JSS moving sandbags, and he got shot, and it went through his arm, through his torso, and then into his other arm. And just, that's the end of the fight for you. He ended up making a full recovery, but like other guys, I know a guy, we were doing a patrol, and a dude leaned around the corner and just took like a handful of shots with an AK, and a round went under a guy's plate and went into his stomach and lodged up against his spine, and that guy's been paraplegic ever since. My best friend got shot by a sniper. Multiple men got shot by the same sniper, which is bananas. We had our JSS blown up. We had a dump truck pull up next to it, a VBID, a vehicle-borne IED, pulled up next to it one morning and then ripped off, killed like 30 Iraqi police. Their barracks were in between our building and the blast. It killed like 30 of those dudes, wounded a bunch of U.S. coalition, but didn't kill anybody. But then there was an 8-hour follow-on firefight where they were trying to penetrate the JSS, which was crazy too, because like there were 2 other JSSs that day in Iraq that got hit the same way that we did, and they had mass casualties. We were like the one that didn't really get jacked up. We got jacked up, but not like, we didn't lose people. We lost people out the fight, like maimed, but nobody died. But there were a lot of people that died on the same day, which is pretty bananas. Yeah, it was just like, and not even just towards us, like There was a fountain that used to be in the middle of Beji. It was no longer running. It was just there, like a decrepit old fountain. And multiple times we would find decapitated heads just sitting on the fountain. They would put them out for us. They would find out who interpreters were and murder them or torture them. We'd find torture rooms and stuff like that. So it was like omnipresent. Like you knew every day where you were, and you knew how messed up it really was. And some days you felt it, like it would weigh on you, and some days it was just like, hey man, this is all par for the course. This is what we're here for. Yeah, and pretty wild stuff, man.
You said that there were torture rooms. Again, if you're comfortable, like, can you remember a specific instance that really stuck with you, or a specific story? If you don't want to share it, no worries.
Oh no, man, none of that stuff. Like, it's really weird because like the stuff that does bother me isn't like, I don't know, it's all the stuff that happened to the dudes that I knew. But like, yeah, we found a place that was in a basement one time, and it had like an inch and a half of blood, like 15, 20 dudes of all age. And I say dudes lightly, like there was like 12-year-olds in there, but like 15, 20 young men, military age fighting men, got taken into this room and just brutally tortured, eventually murdered. All of them were decapitated and stuff, and they just left the room. Like they were never going to use it again. Left all the body parts stacked up and stuff like that. So when we went in there and found it, it was just like, the smell of old blood is wild, and having that much blood in there and stuff, you walk in and it's just nothing but flies and a ridiculous smell, rotting bodies, and then so much blood that it felt like you had pennies in your mouth. Like it was that heavy kind of wildness. That was one. Another one was dudes that had been tied up to poles and had body parts amputated while they were still alive after being like wrapped up on these poles. That was pretty crazy because that was just like out in the open. They just tied them up to a pole and started hacking stuff off of them, and then like all their body parts are just like piled up around the bottom of the poles. Like they just left them where they dropped them. They didn't have a habit of like trying to clean up or hide the murders, which was part of the stuff that sticks with you, is like how Wild West it was. Like dudes would disappear, but like a lot of times it was more of a show of force. Like, hey, we're gonna hurt people, we're gonna kill people, we want you to know that we're gonna hurt and kill people, so here it is, here's what we do. And it's like, oh yeah, that's what you do, man.
And so who were the groups? Who was doing that to who?
So there were so many different groups. Like there were already, when everything imploded after Saddam and his regime fell, the Sunnis and the Shiites really started getting down on each other. So they wanted power, and so they were going hard at each other. They were trying to even use us in their fight against each other, because then they would have like, hey, this guy's building bombs, you need to go and take care of that guy. And so we would end up fighting with dudes that were just maybe like not necessarily innocent, but not necessarily doing the things that we were told that they were doing. And so they were going hard. You had a lot of Kurds coming from the north, and they had been brutalized by Saddam, so they really wanted to get a piece of the action. And then you had all these other little factions, like Al-Qaeda in Iraq was really prevalent at that time. So Al-Qaeda had a splinter cell that they had built off. They had sent a bunch of dudes from Afghanistan to train these guys up. There were Chechens coming in, Syrians, Iranians. It was like everybody that had a beef with America in the Muslim world would roll in. So sometimes you wouldn't even know who you were fighting until after you killed a bunch of people and you could ID them or check them out and stuff like that. So sometimes dudes would just start fights with you, and you would find out that it was just a guy. And then sometimes dudes would start fights with you, and you'd find out that these guys were hardcore from terror cells in other countries. So it was like a smorgasbord. It was like anybody that wanted to fight was going, because it was open reign. Everybody had the same goal, which was just kill Americans.
And so now that it's all said and done, how do you feel about it? Is it something that you regret being a part of?
No, I don't regret being a part of it, because whenever I was young, I was trying to do the right thing for the most important thing in my life, which was my daughter. And I don't regret being a part of it because of the misinformation, right? But what I do is feel animosity that all these years later, then all this stuff starts coming out about how illegal it was, how they knew there weren't weapons of mass destruction well before we ever went into country and stuff, you know. And so it was like, I joined to go fight the fight in Afghanistan because I believed in it, and then I got shoveled off into this thing that while I was there, I was already starting to get disillusioned, but I was also in a very dangerous position. So I stayed vigilant. You know, I didn't let it go sideways for me. I didn't let it take who I was away from me, but also didn't let the scenario kill me, or did my best, you know. But like after all the stuff that I had to deal with after, I spent years dealing with PTSD, anger issues, like disillusionment and stuff. So it's, you know, getting radicalized against the government, you know, where you start seeing through their bullshit, like with all the new stuff that's coming up. Being from my generation and having done it, I'm like, oh man, this is all bullshit. And I can see that it's bullshit. You guys are just trying to do the same play in a different place. Y'all are literally rinse and repeating what y'all did with Iraq in other places and just trying to make money. And I feel more for the young people, because it's like, man, like we should not be fighting wars like that anymore. It doesn't seem like there's a real reason to, other than like, if you look at the profiteering and stuff like that, you know, I mean, it doesn't make sense anymore. We're supposed to be civilized, and then we're out here butchering kids so people can become billionaires, trillionaires and shit. So no, I don't regret it, but I'm not proud of it. It's not something, I don't hang my hat on it. I don't fly my flag on it. You know, I'm just a quiet dude that does my thing now. I have a lot thanks to, but all for hard work, all for a lot of trouble, you know. So now I just mind my own business. I go out and I do my thing, and I just kind of watch what's happening.